Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into this edition of FlixFix. This is a two-parter. There was one part that has no spoilers in it at all, and this one is the spoiler edition. If you want to see something that is not giving away key plot points and details of the movie or anything else of that nature, please click on the handsome gentleman here. He's been playing for a little bit over there. Anyways, if not, then let's get with the intro.
It's time for movie and TV news. Flix Fix with Harold the Film Geek.
Now, as a reminder, this is a spoiler edition. So because this is a spoiler edition, there's going to be a lot of stuff I'm going to be giving away. But this is also going to be a very long review. So as you can see here on the nice, lovely side here, I've provided you some nice quick buttons to take you to the different areas in which we're going to be talking about. Because this review is going to take a while. Let's get started. I'm going to first start off with comparing this movie to the original Christopher Reeve series. Now, in the original Christopher Reeve series, you actually were on the planet Krypton for a couple of minutes. I would say maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I wouldn't know, I didn't have a stopwatch, but it was very quick. Now, on there, you saw his father, you saw his mother, he gets put in the transport, sent off to space, and at the same time, General Zod was locked away in the Phantom Zone with him and his two other cohorts, right? So that was how it happened in the first movie. First movie, he fought Lex Luthor. The second movie is when General Zod comes out of the Phantom Zone and comes down to Earth. Now, with this movie, it's actually much longer. I'm going to say that you were on planet Krypton for at least 20 minutes to 30 minutes. And between that time frame, you got to learn about planet Krypton, what was going on, what was Superman's father's place in the whole, I guess, scale of the not the country, but actually the whole planet. You find out this thing called a codec, which was never introduced that I've ever seen in a Superman series. This thing called a codec. You also get introduced to how the Kryptonians actually procreate. They're not created the old-fashioned way, as they say. They're actually created in like a laboratory, and they're hanging out and being made and then pulled out. And basically, you are being genetically designed to do a particular job. So if you're designed to be, let's say, a janitor, that's it. And the thing was that Jor-El was doing, which was Superman's father was doing in this movie, Man of Steel, was that he was going to try to create his own child, so his own child would have his own destiny instead of being predestined to do something. It's a very interesting take on these things. Now, the other thing I would compare it to is that in the original Superman storyline from the one with Christopher Reeves, you got to see the stair-stepping of him becoming Superman or whatever, and then he's Superman loved and everybody loves him, blah, 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 moving on. But in this adaptation, you don't see that. He goes from being a baby to being a full-grown adult, and then he has all these flashbacks of when he was Superman, or growing up and becoming Superman. So it kind of throws people off because of the fact that he's like, okay, if I'm an adult, why am I keep flashing back to my childhood? But technically, I can see why the director did something like that, because as a full-grown adult, a lot of times you do flash back to when you're a kid to remember things that happened, growing up. So I see the reason why they did that. Now, outside of that, there were some other things that were going on in this movie, but comparing the two from the very first Superman movie that we got back in the 70s to this one, totally different. Another thing was Lois Lane. Lois Lane in the first Superman movie with Christopher Reeves doesn't know who Superman is, doesn't know his identity, and she's slowly learning all this stuff and learning about the Fortress of Solitude and all those other things. This Lois Lane is one nosy lady, and in this movie she found out who Clark Kent was by doing a background search, because another thing was that Clark Kent was going from place to place using different names and aliases so that he could get jobs, but all while saving people kind of thing, but not really being Superman. And because of that, he did something in the movie. I don't want to give away that point because that's a really big point, but he did something in the movie where he saves Lois Lane, and she at the same time discovers the Fortress of Solitude, goes back to the Daily Planet, writes an article, can't release it because Lawrence Fishburne, who I swear I was hoping he was going to say, oh, is he the one? But he never said it, so whatever. But anyways, Lawrence Fishburne then says he's not going to print the article, and in not printing the article, she leaks it on the internet. Now, leaking things on the internet is something very recent that could not have been done back in the 1970s, 50s, 60s, or 80s, which were all the different timelines that we've seen, different types of Superman on the big screen. So I can understand why that plot point was added, because you wanted to give it an air of a more recent storyline. But for some reason, Lois Lane was able to backtrack every last one of his aliases to find out who Clark Kent was, and knowing what the Fortress of Solitude was. And in this movie, Lois Lane knows exactly who Superman is, where in the comic books and in the TV series and different adaptations of Superman, Superman had to reveal himself to her. I think this is a turnaround, because here's the thing. It's like this: Clark Kent, Superman. Clark Kent, Superman. And the thing is that I guess they're making fun of it, because at the end of the movie, Clark Kent wears these glasses and he steps into the Daily Planet, and then Lois Lane says the cheesy little line, "Welcome to the planet." But I think the movie was very interesting because she is very well aware of who he is, but no one else knows who he is. So it's taking that, let's put that on the shelf, moving on to what the movie originally was supposed to be about. And that's what really blew my mind. You see, I've been paying attention to this movie for many, many years, and the original plot line was somewhat still intact, but they changed it. And I'll tell you what the original plot line was, and I'll give you the comparison. The original plot line was that Clark Kent was on his way doing odd jobs or whatever, saving people's lives on the side, but not really fully adapting and becoming Superman. That is a part of the movie. South Africa wasn't. At one point, Warner Brothers was actually scouting out South Africa to be the next point of Superman because of District 19, the movie that was filmed in South Africa about the aliens. I might get the number wrong, but I think it's District 19. But anyways, you know the one with the aliens down in South Africa, and because of that, they said they wanted to film the Superman movie down there, because it's supposed to be that Superman starts off way over here in America. He does all these odd jobs, making his way over. Next thing he's in South Africa, and it's supposed to be that General Zod comes down and he starts to destroy South Africa as a way to draw Superman out. Now, in this movie, it's not that way. It's Kansas, and he's kind of destroying things, whatever. But it's different in very minor ways. So I can see how they kept some things there, but they dropped a lot of different things, like the whole Krypton thing of being such a long, drawn-out process. It wasn't supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be that there's like a flashback to Krypton, and then you see him as an adult, and then you move on. So it's very interesting how they tried to keep those pieces together. Now, moving on to the next thing, the ad placement in this movie was ridiculous. 7-Eleven, Sears, U-Haul, just to name a few, and IHOP, were very prevalent in this movie. And normally when you see these kind of ad drops in it or whatever, it really does cheese off people who watch movies, because they feel like they're being advertised to when they should just be watching a movie. Now, that's not saying that Superman is by himself. In fact, the Avengers was doing Audi and Motorola, so it's not like it's something that's new. It's just something that a lot of fans get kind of cheesed off about, because they just don't want to be ads being put in the middle of their movies kind of thing. Now, currently, at the time of this filming, Rotten Tomato has critics giving this movie 55%. A lot of people not liking this movie, and I'm going to explain to you why they don't like this movie. After seeing it myself and looking at it from a critical standpoint, I'll tell you why they didn't like it, but then I'll give you my actual review. The critical standpoint of it is, this is not like any other Superman movie you're ever going to see. There's many things that Superman has done in this movie that's not right. One, well, no underwear. A lot of people were cheesed off that he wasn't wearing his traditional Superman underwear. Two, his suit kind of looks resembling the new Spider-Man suit, the way it was designed, the meshiness of it all or whatever. So a lot of people thought it was just a revamped suit, and they weren't very impressed with the way he looked. Another thing that they had an issue with was the way the movie was paced. To go forward and do flashbacks is a little bit much, because you're telling the audience, I need you to pay 100% attention for the entire 2 hours. You're not going to be entertained. You're going to have to think. And a lot of audiences just want to sit back, turn off their brain, and be entertained, not sit back and try to piece together a plot line that was being sent out before them. Another thing was the codec. The codec was something that was brand new. I've never heard of the codec, but I've never really read deep into Superman's history, but nowhere in any other movie or TV show or animated series I've ever seen mentioned the codec. And the codec is basically the DNA coding of all of Krypton. And they actually destroyed it, and Jor-El implanted it into Superman's body. Now, here's the thing, that in doing that, it makes General Zod not really the villain. And here's the reason why. General Zod, only point of General Zod, because it says in the actual movie that you are predestined to do what you have to do. And as a general, you're supposed to preserve your nation. The generals in the United States preserve the nation and interests of the United States, just like the generals of Finland would do the exact same thing for Finland. So, because of that, he is predestined to try to keep Krypton together. When Krypton was destroyed and he was sent to the Phantom Zone, when he found out the codec was a part of Superman's DNA, the reason for him recreating Krypton was not to destroy the humans, but because he was predestined to keep Krypton alive, thereby eliminating him as being an actual villain, but someone who is actually aching to return back to status quo. It's kind of like if somebody sits down and they see that the house is painted blue, and when they grew up the house was painted red. Just because they come by and they go, oh, I want to buy this house back and paint it red, doesn't mean they're the villain. It just means they want the status quo back. And one of the things that Kryptonians did in the actual movie was to terraform other planets to keep the race alive. Nothing wrong with that, according to everything in the movie. It's something they did for ages, so why is he now seen as being the villain just because he's attacking Earth? Another issue is Superman had to learn his powers. You never really see him try to learn his powers, and I think they did that because of Smallville, and because of Smallville he had to learn and become, Superman. But there were times, because the original Superman couldn't fly. You look at way back in the day, not Christopher Reeves, but even further back than that, it was that he could leap single buildings in a single bound, but he could not fly. So in this movie, there was a lot of him leaping at first, and then he was able to fly, and then he became, really good at it and proficient at it. And a lot of people didn't want to see Superman building up on his powers. They just wanted to see him with his superpowers. Another issue is Superman, this is a big spoiler, kills General Zod by cracking his neck. Superman doesn't harm a fly. He's never harmed a fly. Even in the movie Super Elite, he never harmed anybody. He pushed them away and they were arrested, but he never kills anyone. So because he actually killed General Zod, it makes it kind of rough, and it makes it a bitter pill to think that the one hero that you knew you could always trust to never do wrong by anybody killed someone. If you look at all the older movies, he always takes them, the people, and he always takes them and he puts them in jail. General Zod sends them back to the Phantom Zone, all these things. And even in the movie, there was talks of reopening up the Phantom Zone and pushing them back into the Phantom Zone, but it didn't happen. He ends up killing General Zod. And a lot of people are frustrated at that, because if Superman has the ability to kill in this movie, then what would stop him from killing any other villains that are going on? Another thing in this movie was that they made a nod that Lex Luthor is actually alive, because in one scene he was pushed to a gas truck that says LexCorp on it, which means that Lex Luthor is actually alive and well. Another issue that people have with this movie is too big of a villain too soon. The first Superman movie, he actually was fighting Lex Luthor, then he ended up fighting General Zod. And I also want to bring up, there was never Neil before Zod in this movie. I was really missing that point. But the thing is that because the villain is such a big deal, this villain tries to terraform Earth, put his people back on this planet, destroy life as we know it, and then we're to believe that there's going to be a part 2 to this. Whoever comes up after this, he has to do something bigger. That's the problem with movies, is that if you make a villain this big, then the next movie has to be this big. But if he's this big, and then the next villain's only this big, it kind of takes away from the movie itself, because then it's like, where's the tension? Of course we know Superman can beat Lex Luthor. He killed General Zod. Big deal. So a lot of people are afraid they might have painted themselves into a corner, and they're frustrated about it. So, with all the critic stuff out of the way and explaining more of why critics are having an issue, what was my review of the movie? Well, I told you from the very beginning, I didn't like the TV spot and I didn't like the trailer. I didn't think the trailer did the movie justice because it doesn't give away enough of the information to make me want to go see it. But I saw it anyways because I know you guys really hated me for all the stuff I said. So I was like, screw it, I'm going to watch this movie anyways. But I saw the movie, and I have this much to say about it. It was a good movie. It was. Take away all the crap that people have an issue with, it was a good movie. It was a retelling of the story of Superman. They made it darker, more brooding, because cartoony doesn't cut it anymore. The original X-Men was very cartoony, and when they rebooted it and they made it X-Men First Class, it was amazing. And this was an X-Men First Class for DC. They took a Superman series that has been cartoony from the get-go and made it into a very much so adult, very much so darker, and very much so more of a humanistic way of looking at the Superman series. There was no up and away. There was no, oh, let me go save this train that's about to fall over into a chasm. No, he was only solving the big crimes. Superman Returns freaked me out when Superman flew up into outer space and he could hear a car wreck happening to this one lady and he saves her. And then you turn around and go, wait, so you're telling me all the plight in the world, you're going to stop a car wreck? Wow, way to go, Superman. Where in this movie, he never did any of that. Zod was the villain, and he went after the villain. And in the end, isn't that what Superman's supposed to do? He's not supposed to save a guy who has a little girl with a kitty cat up in the tree, or a guy who can't change his tire. He's supposed to save the world. And those aren't world-changing events. Now, I understand that this kind of takes you away from the Christopher Reeve Superman, but there's nothing wrong with the Christopher Reeve Superman. He was perfect for the time in which he was made. But when you have movies such as Batman, X-Men First Class, and even the reboot of Spider-Man that's been a lot darker than that other one that they did, it kind of makes you sit there and go, we're trying to do a Justice League movie to compete with the Avengers. The Avengers kind of dark and brooding. We're going to have to get dark and brooding as well. It can't be all this, hey everybody, we have superpowers, let's go save the day. It can't be that way anymore. And I think they did a very good job. I am going to stick by my guns, and I do not like the fact that Superman killed General Zod, but I understood why he had to kill General Zod, and I think it gives him a little bit more of an edge, because even though he was lamenting the death, it was something that was like, it shocked me as an audience member, because I thought that something else would have happened, but obviously that's the route he took. The other thing I think that was interesting, that was a very shock to me, and I want you guys to think about this a little bit, is the fact that if you've seen this movie, the villains of the Superman universe are kind of like this. They're all plateaued because they all have their own levels or whatever. So it kind of makes me wonder, is Lex Luthor going to be a villain in the movie, part 2? Are they going to do a Justice League before they do a part 2? Or are they just going to go ahead and say, hey, we're done with Superman, and let's just see what the world wants from here? Now, there is talks that Warner Brothers said they are going to still do a Man of Steel Part 2, and they're going to do a Justice League movie. But they said they're going to do a Justice League movie after doing the Brendan Rolfe Superman Returns, and they said that after the last Batman movie. So I'm going to say that it might still happen. I think that they picked a very good Superman compared to who they picked before. I think he was very believable. I love the plot. I'm going to give this movie a strong 4 points out of a 5-point scale. So there you go, guys. For all you people who thought I hated Superman, I actually thought it was pretty cool. In all things, guys, thank you for tuning into this super long edition of Flix Fix. My name is Harold, and I'll end episode. If I don't talk to you soon, I guess I'm going to talk to you later. Bye now.